I've received a letter from the honourable member for Port Adelaide proposing that a definite matter of public importance be submitted to the House for discussion, namely the need for certainty in energy policy. I call upon those honourable members who approve of the proposed discussion to rise in their places, and I call the member for Port Adelaide.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. And Mr Speaker, there is this week no more important question before the parliament this week than the question that I think people across the community, households and businesses are asking, and that is whether all of us in this parliament will step up to take serious action to deal with a deep energy crisis that is gripping this nation. Because the crisis has become very, very deep indeed. As we've heard in the parliament over the last couple of days, and as households and businesses know only too well, wholesale power prices have doubled in the 4 years of this government. They've doubled in the 4 years of this government. And as we know, across the country, retailers are now feeding those wholesale power price increases into household power bills. AGL, the biggest retailer in New South Wales, for example, is lifting power prices by 16% for households across our largest state. All of that at a time when wages are flatter than they have ever been. All that at a time when hundreds of thousands of workers who work Sunday, retail and hospitality shifts will be losing their penalty rate entitlements in the next couple of weeks. And all of that at the time when this government continues to insist upon removing the energy supplement designed to deal with high energy prices of about $360 per year for all new pensioners in the country. Now, the Prime Minister tells us yesterday and tried to tell us again today that the only reason wholesale power prices are going up is because of gas prices, particularly because of moratoria on gas exploration in Victoria. Understandably, I guess, politically from his point of view, not wanting to talk about what is happening in New South Wales about gas exploration. But I want to talk more generally about the real reason for household power prices going up, wholesale power prices going up. The Energy Council has been very clear, as has every expert body that has looked at this over the last couple of years. Power prices are going up primarily because of policy paralysis, policy uncertainty that has gripped this nation, particularly in the 4 years since this government. And you don't need to look any further than a presentation that the minister made to the Coalition Party room yesterday, a PowerPoint presentation headed Finkel Review into the future security of the national electricity market. And in that presentation to the Coalition Party room, the minister, who's at the table today, included a graph saying wholesale prices at record levels. And at the next slide in the PowerPoint, which was, I think, helpfully provided to people by the members of the coalition, the question was posed, how did we get here? How did we get here? Well, the minister quite truthfully and admirably said policy uncertainty, which is holding back new investment. And I don't understand that to be a public document, Mr Speaker, so I seek leave to table this document as well.
Is leave granted?
It's a great disappointment. We know exactly what is happening here. Wholesale power prices are going through the roof because this government is gripped by policy paralysis and has been gripped for 4 years. 4 years ago, it knew what to do to get into government and tear down and dismantle the previous Labor government's energy and climate policy framework, but it had no plan, no idea what to do then. It introduced this safeguards mechanism that is so ridiculed, so universally ridiculed, that they don't even bother modelling it anymore. The Energy Markets Commission said it doesn't even bother to model that. It is the existing energy policy this nation has. It is so ridiculed that it's not even modelled as an alternative anymore. And of course, they went after the one energy policy that was supposed to be bipartisan at the 2010 and 2013 election. That was the renewable energy target, which the former Prime Minister tried to dismantle, causing investment to plummet by 88%, and according to the ABS, which reported on JobStarter in the renewable energy industry a few weeks ago, led to the loss of 1 in 3 jobs in the renewable energy industry over the last 3 years, some 6,000 jobs. And the minister has talked about the gas market. Well, for 4 years, For 4 years, people have been warning about supply shortages to the LNG export operations in Gladstone. And for at least 2 years, the Labor Party has said there should be a national interest test introduced around gas exploration and gas export. And up until the last few weeks, when they suddenly got the idea, until the last few weeks, this government has said, it's all working fine. Just leave it up to the market. It's all working fine. Well, now suddenly they recognise there is a seriously deep gas crisis fronting this country. Now, to his credit and to the credit of state and territory governments, the Energy Council decided to try and break through this last year and appointed Alan Finkel, the chief scientist, with a very eminent panel of people working with him. We welcome that. State and territory governments, Labor and Liberal alike, welcomed it, and I think it's a credit to the minister that he tried to break through this. It was on the back of a pretty specious campaign by the Prime Minister about the causes of the blackout in South Australia in September, but we'll let that be a bygone and talk about the positive aspects of this process. Last week, the Business Council, other business groups, the ACTU, ACOS, environment groups, all had a clear message for this parliament. And it was that this parliament, all members of this parliament, should give full and fair consideration to the Finkel report, not rush to judgment, not do the knee-jerk responses that has too often characterised this parliament's response to energy and climate policy for at least a decade. And we are committed to giving that full and fair consideration. We've said the market recommendations, the governance recommendations, have a lot to commend them. We want to study them more carefully, we want to engage with stakeholders, but they have a lot to recommend them. The generator reliability obligations is a sensible next step in us considering how we roll out a greater threshold of renewable energy into our electricity system. We want to talk to stakeholders more about how that might be designed. And we've said we're open to a clean energy target. This is a big shift for Labor. Unlike the Coalition, we took a detailed energy policy to the last election that included a commitment to an emissions intensity scheme, a scheme which since has been supported by the Business Council, pretty much every business group, every energy company, every expert body from the CSIRO to the Energy Markets Commission. But notwithstanding that we actually had an election policy, we've said that we're open to put aside that policy and talk about a clean energy target instead, not because we think it's the best policy, but because the Prime Minister says to the nation it's the only one he's willing to talk about. There are no red lights for Labor in the Finkel report. We're willing to engage constructively with the government, with state governments and with other stakeholders about it being implemented. But I tell you, we won't be party to a sham that seeks to rig the definition of clean energy to include new coal-fired power stations. Let's take a reality check on where the Australian electricity market is up to on coal. Let's take a reality check. More than 3/4 of the national electricity market electricity was generated by coal in the last full year. That's why Australia produces twice as much pollution per megawatt hour as the United States or as the OECD. We need to reduce our reliance on coal, not increase it. Fiona Simpson, the National Farmers Federation president, said as much recently in response to Finkel when she said it's inevitable that as a nation we will move away from coal-fired power generation as assets age. Now, the clean energy target said there is no impost on existing generators. Unlike an EIS, which was our policy, which imposed a direct price on incumbent coal generators, this clean energy target imposes no impost on even the most heavily polluting coal generators. There is no prohibition in the Finkel report on building new coal-fired power stations. Unlike Canada, unlike the United Kingdom, when you simply can't build a new generator that emits more than 450 kilograms per megawatt hour, there's no prohibition in Finkel. Now, they've got a small problem. No one's willing to invest in it, but there's actually no prohibition. But apparently, members in the Coalition party room want to include unabated coal-fired power in the definition of clean energy. And you just can't rig that definition. It would make a mockery of the Finkel process. The chief scientist himself said yesterday it would be surprising to include new unabated coal-fired power as clean energy. The whole scheme would be impacted by a decision like that. It's quite clear the modelling that underpinned the Finkel report did not include unabated coal-fired power being included in the definition of clean energy, and you just have to ask the man and the woman on the Clapham omnibus It doesn't pass the laugh test to include new, unabated coal as part of clean energy. I urge members in the Coalition Party room to take a deep breath, do what energy groups, business groups, unions, ACOS has asked, and give this report full and fair consideration before you rush to starting to rig the definition of clean energy.